Free will is a topic that's often brought up and discussed on the internet, and there's plenty of videos that demonstrate the concept of it, which you've most likely discovered those POV realizing that I have free will TikToks. Important to define our terms because we need to know exactly what we're talking about, specifically what perspective, ideology, or concept it is. And I'm well aware of the complexity of free will because it's a huge loophole of science, philosophy, psychology, and even spiritually. And for the sake of this video, we're just gonna lightly touch on certain topics, focusing on external factors such as systems, law, money, authority, and ideology. And as much as we like to fully discuss about free will, the video will be 15 hours, not 15 minutes, which is going to be a huge flaw, having to neglect so many of those elements. Though it's important to keep those undiscussed topics and consider them during the presentation because they all play an important role in society. I want to use this definition, and it says it's the ability to decide what to do independently of any outside influence. Laws are systems of rules that regulate the conduct of a community, which typically receiving legal punishment when breaking the law. If you scream in the hallway or dancing in the middle of public, no one's stopping them from impulsively being peculiar in public. Now, if we apply the same TikTok logic, that must mean that people have the free will to just harass random people, and just because we're free to do that. And obviously most people wouldn't do that for obvious reasons, but the main reason why is because it's against the law. The laws play a major role in society because they outline the boundaries of what is and what is not allowed. We're unable to function properly nor grasp the concept of good or bad morals without laws. And for the viewers watching this, we can agree that some good morals are integrity, honesty, love, obeying the law, and helping others, while some bad morals are dishonesty, murder intent, stealing, assault, and other devious acts. And that is thanks to the justice system for us to have middle ground on these morals. Unfortunately, some cases of evil morals are still highly prevalent in 2024, but the majority of this world is able to possess good character traits. Imagine a world without laws. How are we able to live a life without rules? That, my friend, is called anarchy. And anarchy is a political ideology that denies the government. They disagree with living under government authority, and they're mostly anti-capitalist. There is stigma surrounding this ideology because it's often perceived as morally wrong, violent, or even satanic. But their passion for absolute freedom and a healthy society is prioritized. They unite as a community to address social and political problems. You are not free. Your ability to meet your needs, your ability to create and pursue life purpose, and your ability to explore the full spectrum of your potential is constricted by a life under rule. Anarchists have an issue with the hierarchy system. They believe that elected representatives, the three branches, political parties, elections, and currency is the cause and root of America's suffering because it divides the country even more and making people feel negative more and more. And so you might ask yourself, so how do these people address criminal activity? Well, they argue that the punitive system reinforces the crimes. So for an alternative approach, there'll be no legal repercussions. However, they confront the criminal with what's causing the act, and if needed, there will be additional resources handed out to them, such as programs or counseling to help them out. It depends. It really depends on the consensus opinion of the anarchists. And some may deny any form of currency because it can spiral into exploitation, greed, or inequality. However, some may use endorsement points. You may receive these points by involving yourself around town and volunteering for community service. Exchanging these points can be used for services or resources. Like let's say Garfield gains 2 hours of endorsement points just by cooking food for the public. He exchanges those points for someone to mow his lawn, which would cost him 1 hour endorsement points, and that worker would work for 1 hour straight. And that's just a hypothetical example to convey thinking of what some anarchists might think.
So, as we have already defined free will, we recognize it is the ability to make decisions without external influences. In my section, I would like to discuss the ultimate influence on us humans, survival, and moreover, emphasize the parallel money has to survival. A person cannot have free will if they do not first exist, and with existence comes the constant need of survival to perpetuate said existence. To survive, we understand we must have access to food, shelter, and water. But how do we get these things in our society? Well, we know it's money. We can exercise our free will to abandon these necessities, but you will not have free will for long. The point I'm trying to make here is that free will seems to be preceded by survival. In most cases, survival is an external pressure because of how demanding it is. It isn't always a mere choice deciding not to die, and this is a restriction on our free will. Let me use an example to highlight this point. I'll use the example of a rat in the forest. The external pressure of survival is too much for the rat to even consider what the rat wants. If you, like the rat, ever want to even hope of doing something that you simply desire to do, then you first must survive this moment. The rat keeps focusing on survival day in and day out, hoping that one day it will be comfortable and stress-free from its dangerous external environment. Only then can the rat start thinking about what it truly wants and start pursuing its passions. The rat will never reach this goal. The environment is too harsh and too demanding to allow the luxury of free will. Survival is simply access to external requirements that we need to continue our existence. So we see that if survival is just continuing existence, then not only is free will second to existence, but also second to survival itself. The need for survival is only difficult because of the external environment. It is because we have external necessities required to survive that survival is an external influence. And succeeding in survival means escaping the restrictions of these external necessities. Survival is not merely a choice in this case, it is an obligation to our existence. Only after you succeeded in survival can you finally pursue your passions and express your free will. Now, how am I going to tie this back to our reality? As we all know, we aren't rats. In our world, money is what we use to get things like food, water, and shelter. In this sense, money is synonymous with survival, since they both hold the same variables within them food, water, and shelter. The two words essentially represent the same thing. Money is just the medium we use to achieve survival, and survival is just the definition of having the necessities necessary to perpetuate existence. Now, how do we get this thing called money? Well, you get a job. In some way, shape, or form, you trade your time and or effort from your existence and in turn get survival. This restricts our free will in many ways. In this sense, free will is forever secondary to money, since that is what we require to survive within society. We are extremely pressured by society to get a job and earn money with our own survival on the line. This places a heavy mental weight on the individual. The individual can no longer do what they want because if it does not fall within the guidelines of financial gain, then they will no longer exist to make the decisions anyways. This is putting our passions, desires, and values underneath money. This creates a drive within individuals to reach financial freedom so they can finally strive for their free-willed passions and desires, just like the rat wishing for safety from its environment. We understand that before this was an achievable goal, known as the American dream as Jordan stated. The amount of time and effort from your existence used to be a somewhat reasonable trade to achieve this financial freedom, so you could pursue your own wills. But as we have discussed, inflation and the unmoving minimum wage moves the goalpost farther and farther back. At the end of the day, you work for money, and that is not a choice. That is a restriction placed upon your own existence within society. We dream like the rat of a time where this external pressure will be relieved from us and we will be free, and for most that equals retirement. But again, the goalpost is moving. At what point do we sacrifice so much of our existence for the hopes of free will, making the trade not even worth it? It is becoming an increasingly worse and worse trade to reach financial freedom so that your true free will can start. Our own existences are stripped from their intrinsic value, which is our free will, and it's held under this condition that we first must earn enough money to get it back. So it seems that for our grandparents there was a real goal. A goal just like that of the rats, which was that one day they would be successful enough in their constant effort of survival that they would be free from the pressure of their environment. But the environment is simply getting harsher and harsher. And as we are pressured by our environment to work harder, we are beginning to seem more similar to the rat that will never be free from its harsh environment, never retaining our free will. Our free will is now heavily restricted by external pressures in our society, and that is inherently limiting our potential for free will. Just as the need for survival restricts the rat's free will, the need for money restricts ours.
The American dream may not have the same meaning or include the same amenities for every person, but it can be boiled down to being able to live comfortably without stressing over money so that you may achieve your goals and pursue your passions. According to a study done by USA Today, the median cost of the American dream has gone up by 47% since 2014, increasing from roughly $130,000 to $180,000 per year. They use several metrics from necessary expenses like car expenses, medical expenses, groceries, education, apparel, utilities, and housing expenses, which most notably increased from an average of $17,000 to $33,000 per year. They also use some miscellaneous expenses like vacations, restaurants, entertainment, Wi-Fi, and things of that nature. It is also worth noting that the average age of first-time homeowners in the United States has increased from 30 years old in 2010 to almost 40 years old as of 2024. This is a direct result of inflation in the housing market, and people often dream of buying their own home and starting a family by this time. But the sad reality is buying your own home at a reasonable age is becoming more and more unrealistic as years go by. The housing crisis is a much larger problem that has not come out of the blue in recent years. This has been an ongoing problem for decades. You always hear stories of how your grandparents bought their own home at a young age, even though they probably worked average paying jobs and had multiple kids. It is the sad reality we live in where we see that type of scenario as unordinary and weird, when it should be the standard for everybody. Everyone deserves to have a chance to own their own home if they work hard enough for it. Inflation can often be found at the roots of this problem as it continues to run rampant and put the American dream out of reach for most people. A 15 to 20 year time span for an adult may not be enough time to achieve comfortable living, and some may never experience this at all. A huge factor of this crisis can be observed when you look at the increase in inflation and compare it to the increase of the federal minimum wage. The federal minimum wage has remained $7.25 for almost 15 years. If you account for inflation, that would be worth over $10 in 2010, and even more if you go further back. The reality of the situation is that the dollar is becoming less powerful while people's pay stays stagnant. Although some states have higher minimum wages, with way higher cost of living, might I add, there are still over 20 states who use the federal minimum wage. Now you may be asking yourself, how does this information relate to the concept of free will in the American dream? Well, we're able to have dreams of what we want out of life, but are often chained by the structure our society is built on. It sadly sets restrictions on people that are hard to overcome. But just because it is hard does not mean it is impossible. You just can't expect life to go how you want without a fight.